Starting in child's pose, ideally over a bolster, or if you don't have a bolster, you could use some pillows or cushions or blankets, or a combination. Relaxing down and finding a comfortable position for your head, and starting to slow the breath down. If you don't have a bolster or any props available to you, you can, of course, just come down into a standard child's pose with your head coming down to the mat. And if your head is needing some support, you could use a block if you have one, or alternatively a couple of books stacked up to the relevant height. You can also place a rolled up blanket or towel behind the knees if you need to relieve any pressure on your knees. So wherever you are in your child's pose, just relaxing fully into it and just starting to slow down that breath. Switching on the parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest system, and calming that fight or flight response that we have when we feel stressed or anxious or overwhelmed. And now repeating to yourself, either in your mind or out loud if you prefer, I am safe, I am well, I am cared for, I care for myself. I am peaceful and at ease. I can manage this situation one breath at a time. I am safe. I am well. I am cared for. I care for myself. I am peaceful and at ease. I can manage this situation one breath at a time. And now, very, very slowly, coming up out of your child's pose and just pushing your bolster or any other props you've been using to one side. We're coming into a tabletop position ready for cat, cow. So inhaling, dropping the belly, lifting the head and looking forwards. And exhaling, rounding through that back, tucking the chin and the tailbone under. Inhaling, we come back into cow. Exhaling, we come back into cat. Continuing to move in time with your own breath. Inhaling cow and exhaling cat. And if you have osteopenia or osteoporosis, just being mindful of that cat movement, perhaps just making it a little less obvious, a little more subtle, to avoid any excess pressure on those vertebrae. And at the end of your next exhale, we're just going to tuck the toes underneath and push back into our downward facing dog. We can pedal out the feet here, left and right, bending at the knees. Just enjoying that stretch through the posterior chain, through the backs of the hamstrings, the calves, and the Achilles. And then you can either walk your feet towards your hands or your hands towards your feet to come into a forward bend position. Remembering though that if you do have osteoporosis, you avoid that forward bend and instead hold a halfway bend with a flat back. If you're in a full forward bend, you could take a ragdoll here by holding on to either elbow. And then when you're ready, coming into that flat back position if you're not already there. From here, we'll take an inhale and come all the way up to standing, rolling the shoulders back and down a couple of times. Releasing any tension through the shoulders. And coming into our mountain pose. So feet are going to be about hip distance apart. Grounding our feet down into the mat. This is a strong grounding posture. Taking a couple of breaths here before we move into our breath practice, which I like to call the coffee press. So to come into this breath practice, we soften through the knees, rounding through the feet. And then we inhale and raise the arms up. And then just bring the hands slightly above the head. So we're almost in a sort of ballerina pose here. And then on the exhale, we push those hands down as if pushing down on that cafetiere and bending the knees as we go. A very slow and mindful movement. Inhaling, arms come up. Exhaling, hands push down as we bend into the knees. And we go again. Inhaling and exhaling. Continuing here for another 3 or 4 rounds. Just in your own time. It might feel nice to close the eyes, but if that doesn't feel comfortable to you, then of course you can leave the eyes open. Inhaling up, exhaling down. Time with the breath. And then just coming back to that mountain pose, keeping the eyes closed if you wish, and just noticing how you feel. You feel a sense of calm, sense of ease, which sets us up nicely for our relaxation pose to close the practice. We're going to come into legs up the wall pose. To come into this pose, we sit sideways onto our wall, or you could do this at the top of your bed up against your headboard if you have wall space behind. We swivel around, lifting the legs up and resting them up against the wall. So the bottom will be quite close to the wall And then we can experiment with arm position, seeing what feels comfortable. Maybe out to the sides, maybe extending overhead. Or it might be that you just like to have them at around about 45 degrees, so slightly away from the body, but still allowing for a little bit of air to circulate around the armpits. And once you've found your comfortable resting position, just checking in and making sure that there aren't any lumps or bumps of clothing or any jewellery or hair ties that might feel a little uncomfortable. Just making any adjustments that you need in order to fully relax, fully surrender to gravity. This is a closing relaxation pose, and I invite you to remain in this posture for as long as you choose.